progress.
Okay, Shalom. This is our last class of the Nefesh B'Nefesh and JNF classes together on lectures on Zionism today. It's been an interesting series. We've gone through defining Zionism. We have seen what Zionism is and what Zionism is not. We talked about the two aspects of Zionism. One is the need to have created a place of refuge for Jews to be able to run in the case of problems that we've had for the 2,000 years of our exile. We needed a place to go to, and that was really what motivated and inspired Herzl to be in such a rush to create a Jewish state. It's what also enabled him to think about other places besides just the land of Israel. They thought about places like Uganda and places of that nature, and Argentina, and thought of places outside of Israel, which would seem to be almost ludicrous to most of us today when we think about Zionism. To think about a Jewish state anywhere but in Israel would seem to be absolutely crazy, but it was considered and contemplated for the very simple reason that there was a worry and a fear, which was justified when we think about how 50 years later there was a Holocaust happening, that there was this sense that we need to have a place of refuge. So that was the first aspect of Zionism. It was really the motivating factor behind Zionism. And then there was the second aspect of Zionism, which was the aspect of the right of the Jewish people to their own state and self-determination in that their historic homeland, meaning that they had a right as a people to their own land. So that land being their historic homeland, the land of Israel. Those are the two aspects. That was our first class, and then our second class we talked about the Jewish question, of how for many years there was a need for a Jewish homeland, and how the Jewish homeland, the question of where the Jewish people were going to be, and how they always tried throughout their long exile. They tried to be in a different land. They tried to get along in all these different countries, and they were accepted for a certain amount of time, and then for a certain amount of time they weren't accepted, and they felt that they really didn't belong, and that had an internal question among the Jewish people of where do we belong, where do we fit in, and at the same time the Gentiles were asking the question of, these people aren't us, they don't fit in with us, they're not part of our people, and therefore what should we do with our Jews? And that was the Jewish question. There were two main solutions to that question. The first main solution to that question was Herzl's solution. Herzl's solution to the Jewish question was create a Jewish state. Create a Jewish state where the Jews could be, and that answers where the Jews should be. Create a Jewish state. The other solution was the final solution of Germany, right? Hitler's final solution. And that was, okay, nobody else wants the Jews. Nobody else will take the Jews. So therefore, where should we have the Jews? So we should exterminate the Jews, because there is no place for the Jews. And the Jews definitely don't belong in Germany, and they don't belong with Europe's Aryans. So that was Hitler's final solution. So the Jewish question had two, in the late 1800s to the early 1900s or mid 1900s, the Jewish question had two main solutions to it. One was thought of by the Zionists, and one was thought of by the Germans. And they both came to answer that same 200-year-old question of, what do we do with our Jews? Where should the Jews go? So those were the main foundational points of our lecture series. And then we moved on to other interesting questions that weren't so much foundational points, but more interesting questions. For this last lecture, what I want to do is I want to go back to a foundational point, and something that for any Zionist is almost an absurd question, right? It's very rare for any Zionist to see this question and take it seriously, because every Zionist would just say, the Talmud has an answer to a question frequently called the word that the Talmud uses is pshita, which means it's obvious, it's simple, right? Like you don't even have to ask that. That's just an obvious question. So that's sort of the answer to this question of this lecture should be pshita. It should be, well, that's obvious. Why are we even spending any time talking about this topic? This does not deserve anybody's attention. The question that we're going to be looking at is Zionism an aspect of Judaism? Right? So again, for any Zionist, Mike, I see in your background you've got an Israeli flag there, and so and assume if you've signed up for a Zionist class, you are probably a Zionist if you're through JNF. This is I imagine the JNF does not have many anti-Zionists signed up through its courses. Right. So I assume that if you're a Zionist, and if you're Jewish, so then you sit there and say, well, of course, Zionism is for most Zionist Jews today, Zionism is an aspect of their Jewish identity. That is something that they view as a whole part of their identity, almost as much as any other aspect of their Judaism. And if you're a non-Jewish Zionist, so then to sit there and say, well, of course I can be a Zionist as a non-Jew, but I also understand that Zionism is an aspect of Judaism, right? Not every Zionist has to be a Jew, but it's pretty much. I've never heard a Christian say, that Zionism is solely for the Jews, and I'd be doing something wrong by being a Zionist. Many Christians would say that about, let's say, eating matzah on Passover. They would say, you know what, like we'll save that. Let the Jews have that one. I don't have to go ahead and do that one. That's real. That's an aspect of Judaism I don't have to follow. But in today's society, what you have in today's times, we're unfortunately at a point where some of the loudest anti-Zionist voices are Jewish voices, right? It's an almost absurdity. If we would rewind 300 years and visit one of our ancestor shtetls in Poland or a small village in Morocco or in Iraq, and we would say, listen, we've got this paint a picture for you 300 years ahead of time, and there's going to be a Jewish state, and the Jewish state is going to have one of the top 10 militaries of the world. It's going to have one of the top 10 economies of the world. It is going to be flourishing. They're going to create this index of somehow measuring happiness, and the state of Israel's people are going to come in number 4 of as happy as you can be, and it's going to be an amazing state. And they're going to say, well, everybody's and a lot of people in the world are going to be in favor of this state. And they say, okay, well, that's amazing. So, and what, all the Jews are going to move there? And then you would sit there and say, well, there are going to be some anti-Zionist voices, and some. Okay, so they would say, fine. Okay, who are the enemies? Say, well, a lot of time those enemies are going to be actually some of our own Jews. I would have to imagine they'd be incredulous to think that would be true. And not only that, but it's not just some Jews will have a problem with Zionism. Some of the most successful and prolific voices against Zionism will actually be Jews. So they'd say, okay, fine. So you're telling me they're going to be assimilated Jews that have nothing to do with their Judaism. And say, no, they're going to be Orthodox Jews who every aspect of their life is run by their Judaism. There's nothing in their life that's not through their Judaism. And they're going to be hypercritical of other communities who they feel aren't as dedicated and committed to their Judaism. But they'll be against this Jewish state. No one would believe this. You couldn't sell this stuff 300 years ago, But we all know that that's the truth. I train high school students to be ready for the college campus. And every one of these high school students always pictures in their mind they're going to be in some large lecture. There's going to be 400 or 500 people in their lecture, and it's going to be about world affairs. And the professor's going to raise their raise their hand and say, so he's going to make a comment against Israel as an example of something that he's trying to point out. And there's going to be a student that's going to, jump on the bandwagon of anti-Israel rhetoric. And this student, I asked the students to, picture, what does that student look like? So I said, it's a dark Palestinian, Arab immigrant into the United States who's there for college. And I say, no, that student will be wearing a chai necklace, and they're going to be Jewish. And that's what's going to happen. That's what you're going to be faced with. That is more likely than not who you're going to be up against when it comes to the Israel discussion on college campus. It's not going to be Palestinians. It's going to be fellow Jews. And one of the, and I know, Susan, you're waiting for a question. Just hold on one sec. And one of the main lines of attack that these Jews are going to have is Zionism has absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. I am a dedicated, committed Jew, right? In my own way, whatever that means. I identify as a Jew, but I'm not a Zionist. In fact, I'm against Zionism for its various different ills and errors that it has. But I am a committed Jew. And that is the reality of today. So this whole preamble of what I was getting into was to the point of, why do we even have to ask the question of, is Zionism an aspect of Judaism? Because all Zionists, 99% of Zionists, can't say all, but 99% of Zionists who are Jewish are going to say that their Zionism is an aspect of their Judaism. To them, it's an obvious point, right? You're not going to find, and for those non-Jews who are Zionists, they're going to say, of course, Zionism is an aspect of Judaism. So who really needs to ask the question, is Zionism an aspect of Judaism? And in fact, if we need to ask this question because it is a point being made against Zionism, that Zionism and Judaism are nothing to, that they're not consistent with each other. They don't have anything to do with each other, and that's the idea. Okay, Susan, you've been very patient.
Okay, now I have two questions. Okay, first, with what you just said. So this whatever you want to call it, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, or anti-Semitism from the Jewish student, is that because of ignorance? Is that because of just the way? Is that because of the way the culture is today, where everybody's like you know the thing where Jerry, Seinfeld is like, he stopped going to college campuses, he'd make a joke and they go, oh, you're racist, oh, you're sexist. Right. They had no idea what they were talking about. But is it ignorance from these Jewish students?
So I from my experience, and I can't say I haven't seen polling on this, but from my experience, it's two things. One is ignorance, but it's less ignorance than, right, because they'll say things that are blatantly untrue. For instance, there's a genocide happening in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank, right? So, okay, so that's genocide is not something that we throw around lightly. There's a way of measuring genocide. And since Israel took over the West Bank, so in Judea and Samaria in 1967, Palestinian population numbers have risen. So either we're really bad at genocide or there is no genocide, right? Those are the only two options. So that's an aspect of ignorance when somebody says that we're committing genocide. The other side, but I think which is more prevalent, isn't so much ignorance, but is more where students are trading in their particular values of their Jewish values for a more universalistic approach. Right. People like calling it identity politics or intersectionality, where you have to be against something in order to be accepted by a certain cadre. So that those are I think the two most common causes of Jewish students who are anti-Zionist and don't see Zionism as part of their Judaism.
Thank you. And can I ask, Rabbi, are you conservative, Orthodox? What do you consider yourself? But that's still not my question.
I'm an Orthodox rabbi.
Okay. So I will go ahead with the question. I'm conservative. I read Torah almost every week. I like that it's egalitarian. I remember growing up in a traditional conservative synagogue where I didn't understand why I was sitting next to the boys and they were going to have bar mitzvahs and I couldn't. I went back to that synagogue when I was 40 and I had an adult bat mitzvah. But anyhow, but my question is, sorry to just a little of my experience. And forgive me, But to me, for a modern woman, the Orthodox lifestyle seems kind of oppressive. I don't know this, but it seems like they sometimes are the breadwinner. Their husband might be studying and not earning money all day, and yet they still have, expected to cook the dinner and take care of the children. And maybe this is, I've just heard this, maybe this isn't the way it is, but
Yeah.
I don't understand the resurgence that it's more popular than ever, even though it just is not, it doesn't seem egalitarian to me, a marriage.
Okay. Well, okay. So, way off topic, but let me just take
I know, but
one
you
second
mentioned our
let's just answer the question just because you asked it, and I feel I should answer it. So, first of all, Orthodox Judaism is not monolithic. Not every household looks the same, and not every Orthodox community looks the same. Uh, I'm an Orthodox rabbi. I'm accepted by all Orthodox rabbis. There's no Orthodox community that wouldn't accept me as an Orthodox rabbi. My wife is the mayor of our town.
Oh,
We are, yeah, she is a interfaith hospice chaplain at a hospital here in Jerusalem. She's a very accomplished woman.
okay.
She does not feel that Judaism is oppressive to her. I don't think any of my five daughters feel that way. There two of them are in university right now, and two are doing national service, and one is in high school. I don't think that they feel that Judaism is oppressive. My wife is not the breadwinner in our family. I would love, there would be a certain luxury involved if I could sit and study, and she would be the breadwinner. I think that would be a nice fantasy, maybe one day in life that could happen. It's definitely not the situation currently. She doesn't get paid for being the mayor of our town. Something that I think is absurd, even though she works 10 hours a day at it. So I don't, I don't see it as being oppressive. That's just my experience as an Orthodox family. But okay, let's get back to the
Thank you.
topic. Sure. Okay, so let's see. Let's delve into this question. Could you have Zionism without Judaism? Right? Is this really a possibility? And now, when we talk about Zionism, all of a sudden we have to go back to our first lecture. Well, what is Zionism? Right? For many of the people that are going to be having this discussion, if we imagine this being a live discussion here, if people that felt that Zionism wasn't part of their Judaism, or Zionism wasn't a part of Judaism, we would quickly come to realize that we are talking about two different aspects of Zionism. We didn't have this lecture, but it does pay to delve into and study the question of, is Zionism a political movement or is it an ideology? Right? That's an important question to ask. Are we talking about Zionism the ideology or Zionism the political movement? And Zionism the political movement. So a lot of people look at that, Herzl's Zionism, and say that doesn't really have anything to do with Judaism, the religion, right? So that's a look at Judaism that is, I think, inconsistent with what traditional Judaism is about. A lot of people think that Judaism is just based on action and behavior, right? And there's no real philosophical tenets to Judaism. There are no axioms to Judaism, but it's rather a religion that mimics what we would consider modern day Christianity, which is essentially built around human behavior and action. But that's not true. I mean, obviously there are actions and there are rituals to Judaism that have to be followed, but it's also about two other aspects that are very important when it comes to Judaism, which is our nationhood and our philosophy, right? Judaism has a very strong philosophy that is a full aspect of Judaism. It is just as important, the philosophical knowledge, as the ritual acts and the way we treat other people, right? A lot of times we negate that aspect, but that's not true, and that's why Judaism spends so much emphasis on study, because in order to master the philosophical aspects of Judaism, one must study them. If not, you're not going to be able to just run into them. So that's and when we talk about it, that's the nature of true Judaism. And I don't think that there's any of the different movements in Judaism will disagree as to the particulars of those aspects. Reform Judaism and Orthodox Judaism are not going to agree on whether or not Torah is divine in nature. Right? Reform maintains that it was written by man, and Orthodox maintain that it was written by God, the Torah. Okay, they disagree. But both Reform and Orthodox Judaism maintain that you need to have an opinion on that matter, right? You need to, that's a philosophical aspect of Judaism that's very important. So the idea that Judaism maintains a philosophy that is an integral aspect to Judaism is across the board accepted. That is something across the board. And again, the details of the particular philosophy or the particulars of the philosophy is something that we find divergent things. Okay, now one of the aspects of Judaism that's so important is that Judaism does not view itself as a religion solely as a religion. We obviously view ourselves as a religion, but we also see ourselves as a people. And what's fascinating here is that, just to go back to the Reform movement sort of ping-ponged on this one, right? So there was right in the early 1920s, I think it was the Pittsburgh Convention, they released a statement that said that the Jewish people are no longer a people. We no longer view ourselves as a people. And that took away, anybody that was familiar with traditional Judaism said, okay, that is a reformation. That's a reform. Right there, you've now changed traditional Judaism to be something different than it was before, because Judaism and Reform admitted, right? They agreed to the idea that Judaism once was a people. Now, Reform Judaism maintains that once again the Jewish people are a people. They don't maintain that it's just a religion anymore, and that we are a people. What's fascinating is that Herzl himself said before he became a Zionist, right, which is funny because he's the one that started this idea of Zionism, but before he created Zionism, he himself said that the Jewish people's only unifying factor that makes them a people is the hatred of everybody else. So once you solve anti-Semitism, there won't be a Jewish people anymore, because the only thing making us a people is the fact that others hate us. So we're sort of always cornered into a room. It's an incredibly cynical view of Judaism and the Jewish people. Obviously, Herzl changed his mind, right, as he developed and matured and began, right? And then, so the fact that one of the aspects of Judaism, and now again that all major denominations of Judaism agree to, is the fact that we are a people, and that is right. If we look at the Bible and we look back at the Torah, and we were not called a religion. Right, the name of a religion in Hebrew is Dat, right? Dat is the name for a religion, and that's not how God referred to the Jewish people in the Torah. He referred to them as Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, right? In English, we would call says the Israelites, right? That's what we were before we were Jews. We were Israelites. Why were we Israelites? Because we came from a place called Israel, right? That was right. It wasn't a coincidence. That's where we came from. So we have those rights as a people. We have those rights, and that is a fundamental aspect of our religion, and that we are more than just a religion. We are a people. Okay, I just want to pause if anyone has any questions or comments to make. Go ahead, Mike.
Regarding the Christian faith that are Zionists, how do you answer them, or how do you engage in conversation when they say, yes, we are Zionists, we believe in Israel, we think it has a right to exist, but oh, by the way, you're Jewish and you're going straight to hell? Okay.
I don't mind. I have no problem with people that think a lot of people think I'm going to hell. They tell me all the time. That's what I do on social media. That's perfectly fine. And they could be correct. I don't think Christians are correct in terms of why I'll be going to hell, but right. And if they're right, then obviously I will be regretful. I'm convinced with 100% certitude that my not believing in their tenets of faith is not going to do me to hell. I never get worried. And again, we've said this in some of the previous lectures that we've had. I never understand the concern that Jews have for what Christians believe is the future of the Jewish people. We're not Christians, so they can have their own belief system. And by nature, the fact that we're not Christians, we believe they're wrong. That's okay, right? So that's fine. Christians always say, "What are you going to say to Jesus when he returns?" And I said, and I'm not really worried about that happening. This is not on
Right.
my concern list. And
Right.
and so this week they had a big thing that they didn't want Christians. They're going to pass a law in the Knesset. Not that, again, I don't want to get into politics, but they didn't want to have Christians missionizing in Israel. That's a big concern. So that, I think, is wrong. I think it's wrong. We have a Jewish state. I think it's a little of a chutzpah for Christians to come in. So us going into a church and talking about the beauty of Judaism. That's not okay. So when Christians tell me that, it's very rare that a Christian says you're going to hell. That's old Christian doctrine. That doesn't happen anymore. I could care less.
Does Nefesh B'Nefesh help a Christian who wants to come to Israel? It wouldn't be considered making aliyah because, right?
So there's a law of return in Israel, but that law of return is only for Jews. So there's no right for a Christian to be able to immigrate into Israel. So Nefesh B'Nefesh is tasked with the mission of helping Jews under the law of return, to the land of Israel. So it's out of our purview, and therefore it's not that we refuse to help, right? That's not our mandate, but we can't help you because you don't fall under Israel has an immigration policy of Jews first. There are Christians that live here, and there are Christians. I'm not talking about Arab Christians that are born here, right? That's obvious. But I'm saying there are American Christians. I meet them all the time. I'm from Montana, but I'm an Israeli citizen. How in the world did that happen? They applied and they went through the whole. To make Aliyah and become an Israeli citizen as a Jew takes about 6 months if you're on top of your paperwork, right? If you're on top of your paperwork and there isn't any extenuating circumstances, it takes about 6 months. To become an American citizen, let's say an Israeli would like to become an American citizen, takes between 10 and 15 years. It's right because America doesn't have to accept you, right? So it's a long process. It costs a lot of money. Right, and it's drawn out because there's no reason why the American government needs to make this easy for you. The same is true for Israel with non-Jews. There's no reason why anybody has to rush the paperwork on somebody that doesn't belong to the Jewish people.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the main aspects of Judaism, central to Judaism axioms, is that the Jewish people have their own land. This isn't something that's ancillary to the Jewish religion. This isn't something that's a side aspect of it. The land of Israel is a key component of Judaism. That is as Jewish as gefilte fish and a pastrami sandwich. In fact, it's even more Jewish than that, right? So it is one of the main principles of Judaism. You cannot have a Judaism separated from the land of Israel. You can live outside the land of Israel as a fully committed Jew, that's fine, but you cannot practice a Judaism that's divorced of the land of Israel. Our prayers, 3 times a day, we pray that we want to go back to the land of Israel. So there have been movements that have excised the mentioning of the land of Israel from prayers. Your prayer services go much faster because you're taking out so much from the prayers. Your Passover Seder is going to look much different because you're going to have to omit where were the Jews going when they left Egypt, right? They weren't randomly walking around, right? It took a while, right? But they got there. They're going in a certain direction. The end of your Passover Seder is going to be next year right here, right? It's not going to be next year in Jerusalem. Right, so we don't say that. Now it could be everybody. We ain't close to Passover, so I'll tell you my favorite Passover rabbi joke. There's a beautiful Passover Seder. There you have the grandparents and you have all the children and the grandchildren, and they're all having this beautiful Passover Seder. And the Seder was so inspirational and so meaningful to everybody. As they get to the end of the Seder and they say next year in Jerusalem, the family rises up and starts dancing around the table and around the living room. They're so inspired by the night and they start singing L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, and they're dancing around the table, and everybody is so happy except for the hostess. The hostess, one of the daughters, was hosting for everybody, and she's at the table and she's tearing up and crying, not out of inspiration. And so her husband comes over to her and says, honey, what's the matter? This is a beautiful Seder you put on. Everybody loved the food, the decorations, everything was so nice. The Haggadah was beautiful. Why are you crying? And she said, because listen to what they're saying. They're saying next year in Jerusalem. I don't want to be in Jerusalem next year. We should do this just as beautiful as it was again here next year. And it's just a song. You don't have to worry. And that for many people, it's just a song, right? It's not about that's actually where we want to be, right? That's not an aspiration. But that is central to Judaism, is that the Jewish people have a land. We have a homeland. Again, doesn't mean that every Jew's going to live there. Doesn't mean that every Jew has to get on a plane tomorrow and be there. But it does mean that you cannot have a Judaism that is devoid of an aspect of the land of Israel. And that's the idea. We have certain commandments that can only be fulfilled in the land of Israel. You could be the most devout Jew in Connecticut. I don't know if anybody lives in Connecticut. I apologize if I'm using your state as an example. But you'd be the most devout Jew in Connecticut, and you say, listen, I read the Bible. Every 7 years, I'm supposed to leave the land fallow and not plant it. So so I have a garden, and I'm not going to plant in my garden on the 7th year. So that's absurd. You're not doing anything. That has no meaning whatsoever. It's that the land of Israel shall be laid fallow. Not gardening in the 7th year outside the land of Israel is not the command. That's not what it's about. It's about the land of Israel. So that's another thing where you read through traditional Judaism and you see that the land is mentioned over and over and over. It is through and through an aspect of Judaism. And this is where we get to our final point, where, yes, you could make the argument that Herzl's movement, the movement itself, the idea that the Jewish people need to develop a state and come back right away, was not a direct aspect of Judaism. It's impossible to make the argument, I think, that it was inconsistent with Judaism or contradicted Judaism. That I don't think is a valid argument. But the ideology of Zionism is consistent with Judaism through and through. Again, the idea that the Jewish people should move back to Israel and create a state in the land of Israel is an idea that is consistent with Judaism and follows through it as an aspect of Judaism, which is why for the Zionist Jews that are out there, the question is absurd. And when people make the claim that Judaism and Zionism are not the same, and the one is not the aspect of the other, the answer is either you're misunderstanding Zionism or you're misunderstanding Judaism. Because the idea that the Jewish people should move back to their homeland is I'll mess this line up as best as I can, but is as Jewish as apple pie. That's as you can never say that they are two separate things, and that's why you have to agree that Judaism is an aspect, Zionism, is an aspect of Judaism. I would say though that you could make an argument, and this is perfectly valid and legitimate. You might disagree. You meaning the people here might disagree. Anybody watching this might disagree. But you could make it that the current Israeli government's policies at any time, I don't mean this current government, but the government policies is inconsistent with the Torah and inconsistent with Judaism. Okay, that's a fair argument to make. You can say that, right? That's a valid argument. That's not based. And again, that could be a point of debate, right? But that's perfectly acceptable to say. That doesn't take away from Zionism. At the Nefesh B'Nefesh headquarters where I teach is about a 5-minute, maybe 10-minute walk from the Knesset, and there's a major thoroughfare that separates the two buildings from each other. And what I always like to say is, here in the Nefesh B'Nefesh headquarters, we study Zionism. What goes on across the street, it doesn't redefine Zionism. Every law that's passed doesn't redefine Zionism. That's 120 people's view of Zionism. And they are the decision makers. They've been elected to make decisions. They have not been elected to define Zionism. That's not what it means when you get to a member of Knesset. They don't tell you, here's what you get to do. And one of them is you get to redefine Zionism. right? So somebody could stand up and say a government's policies, and this has been said all the time in every government that the Israeli government has had, so that this government is not following Zionist thought. Okay, well, what do you? Yeah, that's a great discussion to have, right? But there's nothing wrong with saying that. There is something wrong, I believe, and I hope I made the point here that there is something wrong with saying that Zionism is not an aspect of Judaism; that it is something else. Okay, I will take questions or comments if anybody has. Okay, great. Okay, so this is our last of our lecture series. So I greatly appreciate the time that we spent together these past 2 months, and look forward to hosting you in Jerusalem when you come to the Nefesh B'Nefesh campus.
Well done, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, happy
Thank you so
Passover,
much.
everybody.
I will reveal I don't have much of a family that's in contact with me, and when I pass, I've been very generous to the Jewish National Fund. So thank you for whatever your connection is to that, and for them providing this class to us. It's been very enlightening, and I wish I were smarter to ask the right questions, but I've really appreciated this class. Thank you, Rabbi.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.